What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. What can the Celtics do to improve from the middle of the floor? Or is it about the personnel they use in the middle? For example, using KP's length and vision over the top versus defense. And then the second mailbag question I got was, isn't it easier for a defense to double team if a player is running a cleared side action because the shooters on the other side are so close together that three players can guard four shooters? So for those of you guys who aren't aware of the context here, yesterday we did a deep dive on the Boston Celtics and their spacing principles. They had 30 plays where they ran isolations or post-ups against Miami switches. And in those 30 possessions, 16 of them they ran in the middle of the floor, and 14 of them they ran with a cleared side. And on the cleared side ones, it just was consistently a better result. They had like something like 1.4 points per possession, and that included Jaylen Brown drawing a foul and Duncan Robinson on a cleared side post-up and missing both free throws. So they should have been like 22 points on 14 post-ups and ISOs. And then on the middle of the floor ones, they were like 13 points on 16 post-ups and ISOs, which was, zero point 0.8 points per possession or something like that. And one of the things that I've been talking about is the idea that in the middle of the floor, it's harder to guard, but it's harder to read. And so only the highest level playmakers in the league, or guys that can see over the defense really well, operate really well in the middle of the floor. Whereas operating with a cleared side, it's easier to guard, but it's easier to make the reads. And so it's just a more achievable job for the offensive player by making it so that they only have to look. Just think of it really in a real basic sense. If I catch the ball in a triple threat in the middle of the floor or on a cleared side, I'm protecting the basketball with my back turned to the basket, right? Or I'm protecting the basketball by tucking it on my side and creating space with a jab step, right? Like if I'm facing up, if that's the case, right? Both cases, I'm trying to protect the basketball while surveying the floor. But if I'm at the elbow, it's just a lot harder to read everything happening on all sides of me than it is if I'm on a cleared side and I'm cutting that field of vision in half. Now the baseline is cutting all of this out of my field of vision, and I'm just worrying about this. I can kind of turn myself and I can back down and I can do a bunch of different things offensively without having to worry about what's happening behind me. It is, again, just easier for the offensive player to manage. And so I didn't do a good enough job explaining this yesterday, and that's on me. But to put it simple, the way I agree that on the cleared side post-ups and ISOs, it is easier to guard on the weak side because you have more time to rotate out of it. To put it simply, if you imagine this as the entire width of the floor, if I am in the middle, every pass is like 10 to 15 feet away. Whereas if I am all the way on this cleared side and I need to hit a shooter over here, I might need to make a 25, 30-foot pass. And that pass, if it gets deflected or has to be looping in some way, shape, or form, it's easier to rotate out of it, right? That is where that principle is true. But it doesn't matter if Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum do either one of two things, either in the middle of the floor, turn the basketball over, or constantly settle for pull-up jump shots because they see all these bodies and they're intimidated in terms of making those reads, and it's just easier to take a difficult step back jump shot. And so, in my opinion, and I saw this in the tape yesterday, they settled less on cleared sides. And so when you clear the side, you simplify their reads, you make it more likely for them to be physically aggressive. When teams double team, they have to cross the lane entirely, which makes it easier to sneak along the baseline, like that cut from Jaylen Brown that we saw towards the end of the game, right? To me, it's just the best opportunity to bring the best out of Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Here's the next follow-up. Interesting breakdown of the Celtics matchup attacking. I agree, clearing the side creates simpler reads. Joe Maz clearly believes that the Jays are capable of making those more complicated reads. He's trying to give them reps in case they face a team in the playoffs with personnel that makes those cross-court passes that come from the clearing the side even more difficult than they are. So what he's saying is basically, in the event that a really long athletic team is disrupting those skip passes, what if it becomes an issue there? Surprised you didn't talk about this, but all the zone the Celtics played in the game is another clear indication that they are experimenting, essentially practicing for what might come in the playoffs. They ran zone versus Miami, or the zone they ran versus Miami is different than the one they've executed well versus Indiana, et cetera. C's gave up easy looks in that zone as well as a ton of second chance points. I think Miami had 16 offensive rebounds. That's the only reason Miami was even in this game. sees caught lacking in last year's playoffs without a curveball, and Joe is doing everything he can to prevent that this year. So first of all, on the cleared side versus middle of the floor stuff, in theory, yes, it is great to continue to get reps and kind of make opportunities there in the middle of the floor. But in my opinion, the dead giveaway that that's not necessarily the best way to go is if you look around the league, there's really only a few guys that really thrive in the middle of the floor. And it's always like Nikola Jokic, LeBron James. Like, it's the best passers in the league that operate well out of the middle of the floor. I think that's a pretty clear, and it's just difficult. It's really difficult to do against really good NBA defenses to read the floor that quickly in those types of situations. Now, I'm not saying you don't lean into it as a repetition in the regular season, but something to keep an eye on in the postseason. We tracked it, right? 14 of the 30 possessions on a cleared side. If we get to the postseason and they're not operating well out of the middle of the floor, we want to see that closer to like 25 out of the 30 possessions on a cleared side. That's what I kept talking about with the Celtics as it pertains to like being diligent about getting the ball to the right spots. Like, it's one thing in the regular season to experiment, but when you get to the postseason, you got to know what your best punch is and you got to go to it as much as possible. On the zone front, 1,000% agree. Find time during the regular season to practice it, especially in matchups where you feel like you've got a good chance to win and you're not going to hurt yourself in the standings. Hell, the Celtics are going to run away with the number 1 overall seed, like I talked about before the season anyway. That gap's going to continue to grow now with the easier schedule. But like, I agree. I think it's important to be able to have that punch, if anything, just as a rhythm disruptor. If you got a team going on a run in the third quarter and you can go zone for 4 possessions and just kind of throw a wrench in things for a little bit, that can win you a playoff game. And so I totally agree on that front. All right, last question, and then we're out of here. How can you all say that the Celtics have the most talented roster while they have no bench and their starting 5 isn't better than the Clippers? You said Kawhi is better than Tatum and PG is better than Brown and Harden is better than White. Man is kind of even with Drew, who hasn't found a role in Boston. Only Porzingis is better than Zubac. So I 100% disagree with that. I do think the top 3 guys, like Harden, Kawhi, PG, are better than Tatum, Brown, whoever is your third guy there. But to also have Derek White, to also have Drew Holiday, to also have Kristaps Porzingis, to also have Al Horford, like, they just, that top 6, nobody touches that top 6. And that's why I think that they have the most talented roster in the league. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We'll have a quick show tomorrow morning, breaking down some games from tonight's slate. And then we're going live tomorrow night. I think it's Clippers-Warriors, if I remember correctly, but there's a major national TV game on Wednesday night that will be hitting. So we'll have that one as well. As always, I appreciate you guys. I will see you tomorrow.